Defense of Dinah, Coming Out of the Shadow of Shame is a book written by entrepreneur and local radio personality Lori Johnson. It details a story of a biblical character called Dinah and her struggles as a rape victim. I sit down one-on-one with Lori for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free app in your app store. Lori Johnson, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Man, Quintin, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to come back. Thank you for having me so much.
You're welcome anytime.
Okay, thank you.
And obviously, when I spoke with you for last time for Quintin's Close-Ups, you discussed about your legendary radio career and obviously being an entrepreneur.
I like that. Legendary.
That you are.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And now you are out with a relatively new book.
Yes.
And obviously, you're an author. And it's this particular book, In Defense of Dinah, Coming Out of the Shadow of Shame.
Yes. In Defense of Dinah. And Dinah is a biblical character based on Genesis chapter 34. And a lot of people always say, that's the first question they'll say. Who is Dinah and why did you decide to do this book about her?
Sure.
And I'll tell you a brief story. Back in when I was a teenager or maybe preteen, I heard the story of Dinah in Genesis chapter 34.
Right.
And it was in a religious setting. And when I heard the story, it's not a pleasant story at all. In the story, it tells how Dinah went down to see the daughters of the land. And when she did go there, there was a young man there that sexually assaulted her. Yeah. And the Bible, even God's opinion was that it was something that should not have happened.
Right.
But at the time, this organization that I was affiliated with, they were telling the story in a way to put fear in us young adults, as if to say, see what'll happen if you go places that you're not supposed to go. And I used to always think that that was very unfair. You know, no one deserves to be raped. And I thought Dinah, just because she decided to go and see these daughters of the land, that did not give him the right to do that. I mean, because he didn't have to do that. He could have exercised restraint over himself and not done that to her. And on top of that, in that day, women really, well, much like today, are not really respected much. So he even had the nerve to ask her hand in marriage. And he was given to her in marriage. Well, I had the same reaction as you did.
Right.
I was like, wow. On top of that, he forced himself on her. And then after that, he wants to marry her. That's what I thought. And so I always felt like there was never anything that she had to say. There never was a response from her about this. And I used to think it was so unfair because it was almost as if she was being blamed for being raped. And I thought, that's just not fair. So, unfortunately, every 2 minutes in America, a woman is raped or sexually assaulted. So fast forward to today in 1985, when unfortunately that happened to me, my mind went back to Dinah. And society has a way of blaming victims. And the victim blaming is what I think ought to end. And in thinking of myself and what happened to me in 1985, I began to say, you know, for the Dinahs like myself and so many others, I want to be able to speak out and defend them because society has an unfortunate way of blaming the victim of being raped. And I thought, I want to do something, whatever that something may be, to end that practice of blaming the victims of sexual assault.
From 1985 to now, what is the biggest difference about society and, as you just mentioned, blaming these victims?
Not much has changed. During that time when I had to be the state's witness in the trial of the assailant that broke into my home, he turned out to be a serial rapist. So during that time, going through the trial, being attacked myself on the stand through the public defenders, very disparaging comments to say, the least. Things like, oh, your daughter discovered that you were having an affair, so you had to make up this rape story. You know, terrible things like that is what makes a victim of rape not want to come forward. And so many women live in shame. They keep it to themselves. They're quiet about it. They don't say anything about it because somehow it always turns out that someone will say, you had too much to drink. You shouldn't have had that on. You should have known better than to go there. All of these things that just puts you in a place of being a victim twice. So not a whole lot has changed from 1985 to now.
And then obviously, I want to go back to the title of your book. It says this: "In Defense of Dinah, coming out of the shadow of shame." How did you have the courage to come out of your shame?
That's a great question. And Quintin, I know it had to only have been by the grace of God.
Sure.
To have kept my mind.
Right.
And at the time, I had a 2-year-old daughter and a newborn at the time. And my 2-year-old daughter, because of the struggles in the home at that time,
sure,
she woke up and she unfortunately had to witness that assault. And I to this day, I knew that I couldn't allow him to kill me in front of my daughter because I didn't know what he would have done to her and her sister who was in the bed crying. So I definitely knew that I was angry, but at the same time, I had to find it somewhere within me to really make sure that he was brought to justice.
Sure.
Yeah. And so with that determination, again, with the strength of God. And knowing that with him and to press into the support system that I had at the time, I had a great support system in PAR, the local rape crisis center.
Sure.
I had a great support system with the police department at the time. Then Chief Reuben Greenberg and the mayor Riley at the time, and all of the people at the Charleston County City Police Department just formed a nucleus around all of the women who were his victims at the time. And so that being in that kind of a space helped me to know that all was not lost. The world didn't go crazy, and that there was still some people, who cared. So that helped me, and they encouraged me, PAR especially, and a woman who came out that morning. They really assisted me, supported me, and helped me, to get the help that I needed. So it's very important for women to get help.
Sure.
It's a traumatic situation, and anytime there's a trauma like that, you don't want to just pretend as if nothing happened and that you'll be okay and you can make it on your own, because a lot of times it'll come back, it'll come up, and it still will it'll surface in difficult situations. You're finding yourself just being anxious, just having panic attacks. And these are some of the things that happened to me before I really knew I had to get help. And so that's what I would offer to women. And that's what helped me, to be able to find the strength within, and a lot of times, I read recently where it was a Holocaust survivor. And he was able to say that even in the midst of something as horrific as that, he still had to find a way to sometimes laugh. Laughter can just sometimes be a healing to your soul. And it's not that anything was funny about any of those traumatic situations, but those are things to try to lift you out of it temporarily. And you also say this, obviously, from BarnesandNobles.com. It says this. It deals with issues of victim blaming by looking at the rape of a biblical character, obviously, Dinah in Genesis 34. It is demand for respect and claiming the honor of women. How are these rape victims being honored today? Well, when I say that it is a demand, the book, my intention for it to be my demand for society to respect women. So I would like to, by way of an organization that I call MASTER, it's an acronym for Men Against Sexual Terrorism Engaged Radically. be a master of your own conduct. There are ways to admire women without being aggressive.
Right.
There are ways to allow women to see that you are attracted to them without making them feel weird,
Right.
if I can put it like
Sure.
that. A good friend of mine's, and he's my radio brother, Gino, he likes to
yes.
say the whole, he says it rests on men. Men are the ones who are definitely responsible, and they are the ones that the whole responsibility rests on, not to do that, to not rape a woman, to not be aggressive towards a woman. So men have to master, as it were, their emotions. They have to master their reactions. If a woman doesn't want to speak, you don't have to become aggressive.
Right.
And so things like that. And I think that has to start at a young age, within our homes. And I know that there are many great parents who train and teach, their children, their boys especially,
Sure.
on ways to respect women. So I think that's something that's going to be very important in, helping us to combat this whole issue of sexual assault towards women.
How do you target and provoke the community?
That's a good question. That's a great question. And I think a lot of it takes, a painful look at our own situations, because unfortunately there are a lot of people that have had that experience, that they have not personally had that experience. They know people
Right.
who have. And if you take a look at the dynamic in your own surroundings,
Sure.
you can see in your own situation, in your own family makeup, how the men react towards women.
Sure.
If there is a respect or a lack of respect,
Right.
towards women. And sometimes it takes a strong voice to be able to stand up and say, you know what, that wasn't good, what you said and how you disrespected. Because especially in our communities, we have to take responsibility to stand up when we see things that are happening that are not positive. There has to be a courage that has to take place when things like, like if you see a guy disrespecting a woman, calling her out of her name or something like that, other men in the community, hey man, that ain't necessary. You don't have to do all of that.
Right.
She just don't want to talk to you. She
That's
just
it.
don't want to give you her number.
Right. Leave it at that.
Just let it go.
Right.
So sometimes, confronting one another.
Sure.
I think that might be a step, in the community, really taking a hard look at themselves and ourselves and each other and holding each other accountable.
Yeah, and you also said this too, quote, and speaking of the community, quote, I believe the church needs to take the lead in shifting attitudes toward rape victims by becoming more sensitive. Some people might be sitting there saying, well, why the church? Why now?
Mm-hmm. And that's a good question. The church is a foundation. The church, especially in the Black community,
Sure.
has been a foundational force. There's a one on almost every corner,
Yes.
And one in every neighborhood.
That's right.
And the church has always just historically been the place that we would go to be able to, just to know values and to learn about one another and to look out for each other.
Sure.
And to have a space where we can go. And as they say, that's the sick room. If you're not well, you can go to the sick room. So sometimes what I also found was that unfortunately there were some really serious kinds of ways that even people in the church would look on women, like if they weren't dressed, to their, kind of like a judgmental kind of type of look. But sometimes we, that's what I found personally, and that's not a knock against anybody,
Sure.
but it's just what I have found, that a lot of times in situations of people in the church community and the faith-based community, that's where a lot of the judgment came from. As I said in the beginning, my view of Dinah and what happened to her came from a religious setting, and so that's why I want the church to take the lead and be an example The church can be an example, can take the lead, and show the community that we definitely have our arms out. We want to embrace people, and we want to be able to help, one another in relationships, especially male-female relationships. We want it to be known that, we are the ones that are on the forefront of protecting one another and also making sure that these types of things don't happen.
And it goes on to say this on BarnesandNobles.com, quote, "The purpose of this book is to bring awareness to the impact of rape and prayerfully provide help for leading you, that is, or someone you love out of state of despair." State of despair.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I said, a sexual assault is a traumatic situation. It's something that it's heartbreaking. It's a forceful. What is it? The word I'm looking for, it escapes me, but it's going to come back.
Sure.
It's just a violation.
Yeah.
It's a violation, and it's a form of control, using sex as a weapon.
Jesus.
And it absolutely can leave a woman in a despairing state. And what I found through research has shown that the effects of that shame and that despair, the anxiety and the anguish, because what happens is a woman begins to question whether or not there was something that she could have done to avoid that.
Sure.
Because when you see people and they're attacked, like when you have high profile crimes, like for example, the young woman, and I think she's such a strong, courageous young woman, the Stanford rape case.
Right.
Remember that very high profile case? And he was found raping her and she was unconscious. And it was a despair, but she has written a book since too.
Okay.
And her book talks about how she wanted people to know who she was, to know her name, because how the despair that she felt it was so unfair that he gets to walk off and lead his life and live his life. And here it is, she's almost just left in the dark and left behind. And, so I just think that the despair, it takes a great deal of courage.
Yeah.
It really does. And my desire is to support women, who may not be able to, and it doesn't mean that everybody has to write a book and, be willing to speak about it. But just to know when you see another woman and when you see somebody that's able to tell that story and be able to share it, then you know that your life can have meaning again, that you can, live a calm life. Calmness to me, I always tell people self-care. A lot of people who may be on my Facebook page, you my Facebook friend.
Right.
I like to walk by the water a lot, right? And those are some of the things to do that I encourage people, in taking care of yourself. If you have to unplug, and if you have to just, just breathe.
Yes.
Oh my God, because we're always going, and things in life are just always so much pressure.
Yeah.
And can you imagine trying to deal with something as traumatic as that on top of the daily, everyday pressures of work, taking care of children, maybe parents, and that sort of thing. So, it's definitely my desire to hopefully just be an inspiration to women to know that you can come through it and be whole and sound.
Be whole and sound. Obviously, you have written this particular book, In Defense of Dinah. You're, like I said, an entrepreneur. You're a mom. You're a radio personality in this town. But who is Lori Johnson now after writing this book?
That's a good question. And I found writing this book was very therapeutic, and for me, it definitely helped me now to really understand that what I did at that time was helpful to the city of Charleston and also potentially to other women, because as I said, he turned out to be a serial rapist. Jesus. And so in that determination, and like I said, through that, God allowed me to be able to work closely with the police department to make sure that he was taken off the street. And so Lori today, I believe that I'm just grateful. I just have a grateful heart, and I'm just grateful that I was able to come through that, and to be able to reach back and to allow and to help as many women as I know, as I believe possible,
Sure.
to come through that. It's rewarding.
Mm.
Yeah, it's rewarding. It really is. And to be able to hear people say, I just admire that because I went through the same thing, or I know somebody
Right.
that has gone through that. Would you mind talking to her?
Yeah.
And things like that. I get that.
Wow.
And and just the embrace that God would allow me to give that person, just as I said, just as I think about the PAR representative who was there for me in the very early hours of it happening.
Wow.
Sometimes just to know that there's somebody that cares,
Yeah.
that there's somebody that won't judge you,
Right.
it makes all the difference in the world. So Lori is proud that I believe I'm walking in the calling that God has called me. What the enemy meant for evil, it has turned around for good.
Okay.
And I'm just grateful for that.
That is so amazing. Well, the Honorable Lori Johnson, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups, and congratulations on your book.
And thank you again, Quintin. I appreciate you for having me.
Oh, anytime. You're very welcome.
Okay, great.
Thank you.